Welcome, everybody, to another episode of A Conversation With here on Keyboard Kimura. I'm your host, Spencer Kyte, as always, joined today by someone I have come to get to know over the last couple of years as he has helped me out with the Coach Conversation series. Someone who, before that, I admired for the work that he did in this sport as a striking coach, formerly with Elevation Fight Team, currently with Easton Jiu-Jitsu and MMA, I believe is the official team name. He is Sean Madden. Sean, thank you for doing this, man. I really glad we're able to finally get this together.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a long time coming for this one, and like I said, I appreciate your patience with it, getting our schedules together. But yeah, I'm excited to chat today, man. It's always good talking with you.
Of course, getting the schedules together. Listen, as somebody whose life revolves around my schedule, but my schedule revolves around other people's schedule. Moving stuff around and knowing we'll eventually get to it is how I live my days.
That's how
we will start how we always do. Sean Madden, when did you fall in love with combat sports?
Oh man. So that's a great question. I started watching MMA in like 2003, I want to say, and really loved it then. We bought kind of the pay-per-views and tuned in pretty religiously then. And so, yeah, I guess 20 years ago now, saying it makes it feel like quite a bit longer. But yeah, 20 years ago, I think is when I really started paying attention to MMA. I didn't start training until 2008. So there was kind of a 5-year gap there when I actually dove into the sport and started practicing martial arts. But yeah, around 2003, I'd say is when I started to tune into MMA.
Okay, so this is surprising to me, and this is a great starting point, because I would have thought you were one of those guys that would come on here and I ask that question and you're like, so the Karate Kid and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was in it since I was 6 years old.
Yep.
You only got turned on to this 20 years ago, only started training like 5 years after that, so 15 years ago.
Yeah.
This isn't as long of a journey as I had anticipated in my mind.
Yeah. And I know you talked to Elliot and I listened to that, your guys' conversation too. And that's kind of exactly what you just described with him, right? He's been in it a really long time and came up in it. I didn't, my initial kind of like my initial athletic backgrounds were never in martial arts. I guess on the weekends you could say I was a troublemaker and I was fighting recreationally, like in the parking lots at, in parks around town and causing trouble. But I wasn't having any formal training until like 2008. Yeah. So we can get into that a little bit more, but yeah, I never really had a formal training in martial arts that went back into my childhood,
We don't have to get into the fighting in parks and parking lots because I don't know what statutes of limitations are in different places around the United States. And it's always better. Those are the conversations we have off camera.
Yeah, good point.
But in terms of getting into martial arts, what was then the entry point? You said you were watching UFC events. Was that sort of the catalyst of, hey, this looks cool, let me go and do this?
It wasn't, but it planted kind of a seed, for later on. So I had actually played lacrosse in high school and then ultimately a little bit in college. And then when I transferred, I did a year, I did 3 semesters in San Diego. And then that's actually where I started a little bit of Muay Thai. And then I ended up transferring back to Colorado and stopped playing lacrosse. I was kind of I was done with it. I wanted something else, and then like this seed was still in my mind of like, oh man, like a friend and I found Easton and we were like, oh yeah, this sounds like a good switch of, change of pace. And we went in, Dwayne Ludwig was teaching there at the time, and he was kind of like in the middle of his career then. And we went in and we checked it out and we actually funnily enough, we had a bet. We're like, we'll see who makes it the longest, who's going to train the longest. I was like, okay, cool. And sure enough, my friend and his brother, they stopped training maybe after like 6 months, and credit to them.
Say you won that bet pretty handily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless they're like still training and it's like, man, we're still going and I'm coaching because I need that $20.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just wanted to kind of change pace. Like I said, watching MMA for a period of time before that, I was like, okay, I've watched this. I really enjoyed watching it and following it. So let's go give it a shot. Yeah, so I switched over, and started training and really haven't looked back since then.
So from an MMA space, you coach, you're essentially known as just a striking coach. And I don't say just a striking coach in a like derogatory way, but
Right. Yeah. Yep.
of the disciplines you
Yep.
focus on striking. But I know primarily discipline for you, passion, love, focus, and additional coaching with USA Muay Thai is Muay Thai. What made Muay Thai the thing that really hooked you in?
You know, I don't really know, because when I first started, I did jujitsu too, I trained for maybe about 2 years in jujitsu, and I think part of that was because of watching MMA prior to that, and at the time, um, the Easton / Grudge Training Center kind of fight team. They were training at Easton a couple of days a week. They were running practices over there. Leaster Bowling, who's a former coach with Elevation Fight Team, obviously Coach Trevor Whitman at Grudge, Amal Easton, and those guys kind of had this back and forth training schedule. So guys like Elliot were training then, Cody Donovan, Brendan Schaub, Dwayne Ludwig, George St. Pierre. There was like this Grudge even TriStar Jackson's, like this alliance. It was really cool. And I was around those guys at that time and was like, whoa, this is crazy. And they were coming into Easton. And so I was like, yeah, naturally I'm going to, do some jujitsu and some Muay Thai. I think it's kind of the same reason that everyone ultimately gravitates to either one or the other at some point. I think Muay Thai felt good to me. I enjoyed it. I really love the concept of it, of striking, of playing the chess match on the feet, of making like split-second decisions. And that's not to say I don't really enjoy jiu-jitsu as well too. I actually really like watching jiu-jitsu and studying it. The way my injuries have accumulated over the years doesn't lead jiu-jitsu to being as kind to my body. But yeah, I enjoy watching it as well too. But for whatever reason, I decided to kind of go all in on Muay Thai.
And so how long from, hey, this place called Easton looks good, let's go in, let's make this bet, to I'm going to take a fight and I'm going to do this Muay Thai thing and this is going to be a career pursuit?
So that I think was a couple different stages. I trained maybe for about a year, pretty casually, and casually is maybe 3 times a week, 4 times a week on a good week. And then I remember one of the guys that I was training with had a fight coming up, and he said, "Hey, I have a fight coming up. I'm going to do, I'm putting my training camp together." And this was over our summer. And he said, we're going to train early in the morning. And he's like, "Do you want to train with us?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. No problem." And so I started training, pretty hard and pretty consistently to help him get ready for his fight. And that kind of opened a new door and a new level to the sport to me. And I was like, "Oh, wow, this is awesome." I think I probably want to fight sometime on my own and try it out. And the way Dwayne was back then was, he was fighting still. And so me now going through that cycle of I was fighting and coaching at the same time, and now I'm done fighting and now just coaching, I can look back and understand his train of thought for everything. And he was fighting at a much higher level than I was. I asked if I could take a fight, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Like, you're going to go do a fight in 2 weeks, and what it was a smoker at a gym. But it was like very informal, it didn't mean anything to him, and it shouldn't have, ultimately at the end of the day, it was just a smoker. He's like, "Yeah, you're going to go down, you'll train for 2 weeks and then go beat the shit out of this guy." I was like, "All right, cool." And I did. And I was like, "Awesome. This is great." Yeah, I want to do more of this. And that was just kind of his approach to coaching athletes at the time, because he had to focus on himself more than anything. At that time, I think he was in the UFC at 2008. I can't remember. Maybe just, yeah, probably right in the,
feels like it was right around there. Yep.
Yeah. I think he was kind of in the middle of his UFC career then. So his focus was not developing athletes. His focus was himself. And if some of the athletes could be training partners for him, he'll use that for that. And so I totally understood that. I did a lot of the training on my own and with my teammates and training partners at the time, and didn't have a ton of guidance as like an actual fighter, which kind of led to a mediocre fight career for me, which is totally fine, because I learned a lot that way. So I kind of, I took fights along the way. I got some good opportunities. And then, at some point, I was fighting still, but I was like, hey, like I had some injuries. I really, really liked coaching. And then, I think we ended up kind of just making that transition over. And here we are now. So
Yeah. What plants that seed of I like coaching? Like what kicks that off? Because I know for some people, the idea of coaching is antithetical to their being. The idea of putting myself second or guiding someone else rather than focusing on myself just doesn't compute. But then there are also people who are naturally drawn to it. And from the relationship we've built, from even just people that follow you on Twitter and Instagram, I think they can see you are naturally built to be a coach and a motivator and an inspirational sort of person in someone's corner being like, hey, let's get you to where you want to go. What was it for you that sort of kicked that off or like gave you the understanding of like, maybe this is the road for me?
yeah, I touched on it a second ago, and like I said, I was a relatively mediocre fighter. Like I had a slightly above 500 record. I fought tough opponents, which is awesome, and I really enjoyed fighting because it's hard. But I never really set out to be a world champion. I never had goals in the sport of really getting to a certain spot. I just wanted to fight to test myself. So, in my experience and opinion, I feel like a lot of mediocre fighters become great coaches. And I'm not saying I'm great, but I do historically look back at that and see that, if you're a great athlete and a great fighter, you're pouring so much into yourself, as you should, that you're not thinking about anyone else around you. And that's totally fair. I think we hear this all the time, right? But to be a high level athlete, and especially a fighter, you have to be 100% selfish. And a high level coach, an elite coach, has to be 100% selfless to their athletes. So, I felt like for most of my fight career, I was kind of like in the middle of that, of like, yeah, I was training myself and I was getting ready for fights, but I was also helping the people around me at that time. So like I had kind of like, I had two buckets at the same time.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I felt fulfilling helping other people out, imparting the little knowledge that I had at the time and giving them some stuff and seeing that kind of work. And I was like, yeah, man, this feels fulfilling to me. Not that fighting wasn't fulfilling, but it was something that I wasn't going to pursue for a long time. Like I said, I enjoyed fighting because it was hard and I learned a lot about myself. I didn't set out to be a world champion in fighting. So for me, it was a relatively easy transition. And the injuries helped facilitate that. They kind of forced my hand to go into coaching.
Kind of tell you that you can't keep doing the other
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And, maybe sooner than I would have liked. But that's okay. Ultimately it ended up working out just fine. But yeah, I didn't have too hard of a time making that decision for myself. And I feel much more fulfilled helping other people kind of achieve goals in this sport and do things well beyond whatever I accomplished as an athlete,
So there's a couple pieces there that I want to dive into. The first one, though, the first thing I need to say is you are a fantastic coach. You
I
won't
appreciate
say it.
that.
I will say it.
I
I
appreciate
will say it
Thank
for
you.
you.
Thank you.
You mentioned in there that you never set out with that mindset of I'm going to be a world champion. It's a thing I think about literally every day as I talk to athletes, as I watch stuff, as I consume content, as I sort of build. Because to me, and I joke about it all the time, right? When we're watching UFC events and they do the intro thing, and it's the guy that's 3 fights into his UFC career and is 1-2 and talks about, I'm on the brink of making a run here and I'm going to get, and I just always tweet out something along the lines of like, this is why I couldn't be a pro fighter or a fighter in general, because my mindset would be like, nah, I'm going to be 74th.
Yeah.
And like somebody's got to be 74th.
Yeah.
But to me, for me in that instance, it's a healthier mindset.
Yeah.
It's a healthier understanding. It's a more realistic. As a coach who has been through the fighter side of it, how do you work with athletes where you recognize and go, that goal you're setting may be a little high. Do we work to scale it back? Do we just manage? What's the process there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been through this a ton of times. And you know what? Look, I'll say this too, because it's it's to no fault of the athlete. They're you know, especially in this sport, you have to have almost you have to be almost delusional, you
Right.
know. You're getting,
Pathologically confident.
yeah, exactly. You know, like, and I don't blame them for that at all. You know, it is the job of the coach, and maybe to some extent, maybe the manager to say, okay, we hear your goals, we understand that, we support that, but we have to be the ones that are realistic, and like you said, we have to carve a path to maybe try to get there. You know, so in my mind, if I have an athlete who's, let's just say maybe they're like 3-3, right, or like 5-3, and they're like, yeah, I want to be world champ. For me, it's like, okay, well, we have to win a couple fights on the regional scene first, right? Like we can put together a path to get there, but you have to hit these benchmarks along the way.
Right.
And I'm gonna do my best to help you achieve that goal. But if we don't hit these benchmarks, if we're failing at some of these benchmarks, okay, I'm hoping that us failing at those is going to allow you to realign your goal a little bit, you know, because what I don't want it to be binary for people of like, I'm going to be a world champion or I'm not in this sport at all.
Right.
Right. Because, you know, like I said, my career as an athlete existed as, hey, look, I want to fight because I want to test myself, but I'm not going to be a world champion. I did that. So there's a space for people to be able to do that. I don't think everyone has to believe that they're going to be world champion. You're not going to train any less hard just because you're not the goal is not the UFC title belt.
Right.
I think for a lot of people it should be. But yeah, it's just not realistic for everyone. It's not realistic for everyone. There's people in the UFC, I believe, still that don't have aspirations for the UFC belt. I think they're saying it because that's what people want them to say, and there's
Right.
pressure.
That's what you're supposed to say.
Yeah, exactly. That's the narrative, right?
Yeah. And like I want to be clear, and I think anybody that follows my stuff and has listened to various podcasts and interviews I've done, I'm the chief of the being 7th in the lightweight division is outstanding. Being 23rd takes a great deal. Like there is room for all of these people. We need them in the ecosystem. I don't think it has to be your first or your last. There's no Ricky Bobby mentality for me.
Yep.
I think we need those people. And so it's always fascinating to me. And I appreciate getting the insight from you as to sort of working with somebody that's at those points. And you mentioned the benchmarks. I think that is such a important part of it. And a thing that we miss sometimes in talking about these athletes, whether it's somebody coming up, whether it's somebody kind of resetting, trying to go on a run, is like, what are the markers that they've hit along the way? What are the indicators that we have that we can look at and go, these are the things we've seen from people that have gotten to these points or are on their way to those points. How does that person measure up? And not everybody's going to compare out evenly, but it is that indicator. Do you do stuff like that? Do you work with stuff like that when you're working with some of these athletes, of like, not a comparison, because that's a difficult thing to always put against somebody, but like, let's just look at some of these markers. You mentioned we got to take some fights on the regional circuit.
Yeah.
I know in talking with Safe regularly, he often talks about the LFA titles that they've won at Fortis MMA of like, if we can get to that, we know that's a certain level and that's going to graduate us to the next one. And once we get there, we know what guys like Jeff and guys like Ryan Spann and whoever else have gone through to have success and do. Let's hit those rungs on the ladder. Is that sort of the approach?
Exactly. You know, let's put a couple wins together on the regional scene. You know, let's get an LFA contract or a CFFC contract, right? Something Fury maybe, right? Can we win the title there? Okay, we win the title. Maybe we get a call up. The next step for me is like, can you get through your first UFC contract, right? Can you finish your first UFC contract? Because there's a lot of people that don't do that, right? It's a lot easier these days, in my opinion, to get into the UFC now, just based on the entire kind of ecosystem and how they operate their business. Can you get through your first UFC contract? Can you get through your second UFC contract? Okay, now we're talking. All right, we're 8 fights deep, right? Now are we fighting someone who's, you know, what maybe people would consider the top 20 of that division, right? And then we can work our way from there. So I'm going to give an example that I think fits this really well. And this is not any slight on this person, Drew Dober, who I love dearly and is a phenomenal athlete. You know, he's had a couple fights in the top 10, he's floating in that top 15, right? The fights that he's had in the top 10, he's come up a little bit short on. They've been fantastic performances. He's, in my opinion, and I've heard him say this too, he's an entertainer. He loves fighting. He loves it. He lives for it. And the UFC knows that. And they give him the matchups that are going to pair with that. And every time Drew Dober fights, everyone is tuning in for it. And he's getting a bonus, or they're both getting a bonus. Drew's killing it in life, man. He's killing it. Does he want to be the champion? I don't know. Maybe. But I know for sure that he loves to entertain people.
And Drew, to me, is the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
We need dudes that are number 16 in the lightweight division.
Right there.
And are always entertaining. If things break right, he's in the top 15. He's chasing top 10.
Yep.
If they don't, well, we had a hell of a time watching it. He seems like everything's going fine. As I often say with Drew, at the end of the day, he's still ridiculously good looking.
Yeah, like, he's always got that, right?
He's always got that going for him. So like, that's better than most of us. And so, yeah, he's a perfect example too.
Yeah. And look, a lot of this is circumstance too. And look at the division he's in. It's insane. Yeah. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. It's stacked. The top 25, the top 30 of those guys are all monsters. And so it's just on any given day in that division, and it's just who you end up with, the timing of the matchups for that division, for him to be a name in that division, as long as he has been, to put on the fights that he's put on. Has he fought for the UFC title yet in that division? No, he hasn't, but he's made a great living fighting the way he fights. He entertains the hell out of the fans, and he loves what he does. Man, to me, that's a massive success. That's a massive win,
And to me, it's a thing we don't talk about enough. Like, and I understand very much that this is sport and competition, and we look to champions. We value greatness. We value that success higher than most things.
Yep.
In MMA and generally everything. But there's also that, like, okay, but this dude's really entertaining. Yeah. And sure, he didn't get there, and the record isn't clean, and it's not 15-1 in the UFC or what. Did you have fun watching this guy's career? Did he enjoy himself? Is he happy doing what he's doing? Then why can't you be? Why are you out here saying, well, Drew Dober isn't? Yeah, there's some things he's not, but there's a lot of things that he is. And
exactly.
Shouts to Drew Dober.
Big time. And I think that's something, that he takes from, and I also borrow from kind of the Muay Thai side of things, right? Where you see a lot of guys in the stadiums in Thailand, they have 200, 300 fights to their name, and 50 or 60 of those fights are losses, right? They lose a lot, but the people there are more concerned about the performances and the effort that you put into the fight than the result itself. People in Thailand largely are very unhappy if you put on a lackluster performance, right? Or maybe you just edge out a win by points, right? But if you put your heart into the fight every single time over there, the result matters less. Drew comes from a Muay Thai background, right? I come from that Muay Thai background, and I do, we've had this conversation before, but I feel like some of that mentality kind of trickles into how I approach this side of the sport as well too, even though they're very different.
Right. For you as a coach, what are some of the keys for you? What are the things you focus on the most with athletes when you're starting out and building that relationship of, yeah, we're going to work together, but these are sort of if you can't get on board with this, these are the Sean Madden tenets.
Sure.
And if you can't get into it, this isn't going to work.
Sure. Man, I'm really meat and potatoes with how I coach. Kind of one of my main principles for Muay Thai and for striking is like 85% fundamentals and 15% maybe some flash or some unpredictable stuff. And that's how I largely approach all of my training. Look, for me, first and foremost, if you can't be on time to my training sessions, and by on time, I mean early, we're not working together. Like that one for me is, I don't care who you are. I've worked with people who have made a lot of money in the UFC that are high profile, that have been interested in working with me, and they show up 30 minutes late. I get the fuck out. I'm sorry. I don't operate that way as a human being. And we have to make sure that we're on the same page starting with that, So I strongly believe in how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if I see these athletes coming in early, setting the tone for their workouts, prepared right when it's 11 o'clock and you're ready to rock, because you got there at 10:30 and you warmed up the right way. Cool. We can get right to work off of that. Right. That's a big one for me. That's a really big one for me. I know other coaches have different philosophies on that, and that's totally fine. I like to be punctual. I like to be, really focused on the small details. And that one matters a lot to me. So we start with that. Can you be on time? And then can you be okay doing the little things, the boring things every single day? Especially in a sport like MMA, pad holding it to me is kind of like this weird thing. A lot of fighters want pads. They want to hit mitts. They want to feel good. They want to feel fast and sharp. Are you okay just jabbing for 30 minutes, right? And making sure your feet are in the right spot.
Right.
You making sure your defense is built into your offense. Are you making sure you're understanding the nuances of the jab? If you can do that, right? And maybe not even me holding the mitts while you're doing that. Maybe you just shadow boxing that. Maybe you're doing it on the bag. And then at the back end of the session, once you've understood that, then we're going to get on the mitts after that. If you're cool with that, we can work together. If you want to hit mitts for a workout and to feel fast and sharp, I'm probably not the guy for you. I believe in, especially in the MMA space, like everything, you can get into MMA without any barrier to entry at almost any level, right? Like manager, athlete to some degree, coach, whatever it is, right? There's a lot of pad holders in this sport, which is great. You need that too. And then there's a lot of striking coaches, and I'm doing my best. I want to be a striking coach, not just a pad holder. And I think like I said, a lot of MMA athletes like pad holders because they make them feel good. They make them look good. They're sweating, and there's this concept of working harder in MMA is better. So yeah, man, if you can go the first couple of weeks of just working on the basics and not getting bored with that stuff, and trusting the process and not getting caught up looking at Instagram of what your friends and teammates are doing of these 35 piece combinations, spinning this, striking that. Cool. Then we can work together, and there's going to be a time and a place for that, but it's down the road. I'm a really strong believer in fundamentals winning fights, positioning winning fights, little things like that. And that's a big part of my coaching philosophy. So if you're cool with that, we can work together. We can be in the trenches together. But if you want anything other than that, then I'm probably not the coach for you.
Yeah. One of the things I have written down here is chop wood, carry water.
That's it.
Every day.
Every day. Yep. Every single day.
You mentioned the pad holding thing. It's always been a fascinating thing to me because I think it is very much a way that fans and observers, even media, and certainly you can tell me, fighters and coaches, and probably I won't argue with you. You get lost in seeing it, right? Because as you said, it looks great, but a good pad holder can make me look good on pads.
Anyone
can make me look like I know all of what I'm doing, and I got nothing. Right? Like, yeah, I can throw a bad jab, I can throw a bad cross, like, sure, but get somebody that knows how to hold pads and come forward with you and give you everything. They make me look great.
Yeah.
And then I got that on my IG reel. And so I appreciate the commitment, the focus to fundamentals and the basics and getting that dialed all the way in. Another thing, and I mentioned it earlier, anybody that follows you on Instagram, that follows you on Twitter, will see I don't even want to call them motivational posts because I don't think they're motivational posts. They're, to me, life posts.
Yeah.
Just directives, just messages, and they're often mindset focused.
Yep.
I know you post a lot about stuff you're reading in that area as well. What for you has made that side of things such an important focus, both personally and professionally?
I think it's just been kind of an accumulation of the experiences that I've gone through in the sport, and then also just working, as kind of an employee at Easton. A couple years ago, I want to say maybe 2017 or 18 or so, I was in a position at Easton where I was trying to work my way up a little bit, and I was kind of stuck. And, Elliot and then Mike, who's our president and CEO here, he had a conversation with me and said, "Hey, man, look, you need to read more, you just need to develop yourself a little bit more." And at the time I wasn't reading anything, I was studying the sport, but I wasn't reading anything and developing myself as a person. And he basically, he gave it to me and said, "Hey, look, you need to read these things if you want to progress further with us." And I was like, okay. And, I reluctantly read them. and, you know, reading and just the act of it kind of changed my whole perspective on things. You know, it forced me to grow as a person. It forced me to look at things differently, and I'm really grateful for that. And, you know, I've continued to challenge myself by reading all the time ever since then. I think that, paired with just the experiences I've had in this sport, both on the Muay Thai side and the MMA side, watching coach and athlete dynamics, watching team dynamics, watching teammate dynamics, and just kind of seeing this stuff over the years has just given me a perspective and given me some understanding on some things. I don't think anything that I post is groundbreaking or earth shattering. These are not giant revelations, but to me, they're just kind of reminders of what I see in the sport. What can make you successful if you choose to do them, and if you don't, that's fine. That's up to you. But they're just kind of like reminders of things that I've come across over the years. So a lot of it, you know, has been through maybe bad experience, or things that I did wrong as an athlete or even as a coach, things that I fucked up. So I've learned those lessons the hard way, which I'm grateful for. And I like to just share and remind those things with people, and hopefully they can connect with them. So, yeah, I just like putting that out there. There, you know, at the end of the day, the reminders for myself too.
Right.
When I post those things, I'm accountable to them. My athletes see them, and other coaches see them, and I have to be held to that. And something that I really, really value across any space is consistency in your word and your actions, whatever it is in your lifestyle. And so for me, when I post those things, you know, I have to be accountable to them as well too. So
what were some of the books on that early reading list, and what are some of the recommendations you would have for people that want to sort of follow that similar path, not necessarily of coaching, but just of opening their mind a little bit more, getting some of this insight, some of these thoughts to maybe stimulate further growth in their own careers?
Sure. Well, one of the first ones I read, actually maybe not one of the first ones, but one of the ones that was very impactful for me was Jocko Willnick's Extreme Ownership. And I know that's not everyone's path or their cup of tea, but just the concept of understanding that you have the ability, or you can look at things of, hey, everything is my fault and I can own everything that I do. And I think if you have that mindset, you have the power to change a lot of things as well too. Instead of having kind of this passive victim mindset of, you know, things are happening to me and I feel bad for myself. If you learn to start to kind of own your own shit and be accountable to what you're doing, I think your life can change pretty drastically. You can really get a hold of things that are happening. So that book helped me a lot. It taught me exactly what I just said, and helped me learn to take accountability on the conversations that I was having, the actions that were happening to me, around me, for me, and just really changed my mindset. So that book, in my opinion, is kind of a must read for everyone. I think that one's really important. Whether you like Jocko or not, in my opinion, is irrelevant. I think you can still take the message and appreciate the message. Whatever your thoughts are on the person who wrote the book, to me, doesn't matter. I read a lot of books. Sometimes I know the author, I disagree with the author as a person, or maybe what they've done outside of writing the book. And I try to just separate that from the content inside of the pages. And I think having that perspective is really important. Brene Brown wrote a couple really great books that we talked, and I'm looking back at my bookshelf right now just to get a quick refresher what we got over here. She wrote a couple really great books about kind of like being vulnerable and being able to have kind of candid conversations. That one was a big one for me. I think fighters struggle with being vulnerable, just in general, and that's a byproduct of the sport, right? You have to protect yourself.
It's not just fighters.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah,
it's not just fighters.
It's
all of
humans
us
in general
struggle. Yeah.
But I do think fighting kind of like really magnifies that, and
certainly,
you know, like so that was, reading her books was a good breakthrough for me. And of course, a lot of the stuff that I post, you know, some of the stoicism stuff, Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy, The Obstacle is the Way, The Daily Stoic, which is a great read, a short read daily. Look, you don't have to subscribe to stoicism. You know, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but that helped me just learn to be a little bit more not so up and so down with everything that happens in life. You know, and I do think that's really important for fighters too. We know this sport, everyone says it, the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. That's absolutely true. But if you allow yourself to kind of get moved by every single event that happens in this sport, it's really difficult. And not only for the athletes, but the coaches, because the coaches corner every single weekend, right? The athletes fight maybe 3 times a year, right? But a coach has to deal with a big win last weekend and then a massive loss the next weekend, and then maybe another loss and then back to a big win. So for the coaching side, I do think some of the things from stoicism can be very helpful just to learn to navigate those peaks and valleys as you go.
Big Brene Brown fans in this
She's
house
awesome
as well. Amazing.
Awesome.
And listen, as I said, vulnerability is a thing that everybody struggles with. I loved one of the posts that you had was have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Just learn to have them. I think it's something we all need to do. And that's a message that can extend well beyond the walls of MMA.
Agreed.
So having covered all of this coaching stuff and philosophies and ideas and things like that, and knowing, as I said, that you are a terrific coach.
Thank you.
Guiding world-class athletes at all levels. How humbling, how difficult is it to go from work and get home and have Humphrey and Wally just be like, nah, man, I ain't listening to anything you say.
Oh man. Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, come home from a day of work with the fighters, you know, maybe come home from a big win overseas, right? We come back, walk in the door, see them. Wally's peed on the kitchen floor.
Right.
Humphrey doesn't even acknowledge me after being gone for a week. Yeah, man, I love them. They're fantastic. You know what, to be honest, I never had dogs before these two. Growing up, I didn't have dogs. And so these are my first 2 dogs, between me and my girlfriend, Abby. And we got Humphrey at the end of February 2020. So 2 weeks before everything.
Right.
So he's, you know, he got all the attention in the world, when
Right.
we couldn't do anything other than spend time with him, and he's spoiled as a result of that. And we got Wally a year later, and we always joke we got Wally is Humphrey's dog. We got him for Humphrey.
Right.
You know, so but man, they've been incredible. Look, just like with your dog, they've taught me so much about life. About putting some of the stuff that I read into practice every single day. They really test me with that stuff. But I couldn't imagine life without them. I know this is true probably for a lot of coaches. And I don't have kids yet, but if left to my own devices, I would only focus on combat sports every single day, every single hour. I don't have other hobbies. I don't do anything else. I don't.
Okay, so that knocks off one of the questions that was upcoming.
I don't do anything else. I don't have any other hobbies. I live in Colorado. It's beautiful. I never go to the mountains. It's, sometimes it's embarrassing to say because everyone else has hobbies. I don't do anything else. And if Abby left me to my own devices up here, I would just be watching fights all day, every day, studying, networking, talking, game planning. So to have the 2 dogs and obviously my girlfriend, Abby, they provide a nice balance to life, and they force me, with whatever the dogs are doing, to be a little bit more present and take my mind sometimes off of, the fights and whatever's coming up. So it's an unintended benefit of having them, but it's a really profound benefit, and it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, as you said, I fully understand, because if not for the have to take the dog out, and we're now in a situation, we actually had our dog get out on Saturday and got into an altercation with another dog. So now we have to be super vigilant about some stuff.
Yeah.
And get him to open free spaces for walks and muzzled and the whole
Is he
nine.
okay?
He's okay. The other dog is okay. Just hella traumatic Saturday afternoon. My niece and nephew were over. Just series of gates left open, literally and figuratively. But you could never, in 1,000 years, this is never going to happen this way again. The timing of everything, but just it was a weekend. It's been a few days. It's been rough.
I'm glad they're okay.
They're both okay.
Good.
But if not for him, I would be in the same spot of you as I'm in here. I'm doing work, I'm building stuff, I'm creating stuff, I'm working on thumbnails, I'm researching, I'm figuring out the next thing, and then I'm watching fights.
Yep, exactly.
And if not for him and the fact that I need to be the one that makes sure that that there's groceries in the fridge because my wife works and she helps provide for this life for me, we'd just be doing takeout all the time. And
Yep,
so,
yep.
yeah, I understand dogs and partners as greatly beneficial. There's no other hobbies, nothing, no special skills, no secret abilities like can you cook, can you dance, can you sing? Nothing.
Nope.
Fights, that's it.
I can cook enough to feed myself, and sometimes Abby likes it, I'll cook enough to survive. I'm telling you, man, and part of it is the fact that I'm, in the grand scheme of things, I'm 34. I'm not an older, more experienced coach, right? When you look at the guys like
Right.
Elliot or Cody Donovan or Eric Nixick or Henry Hooft or Safe, these guys are in their mid 40s and they've been doing it a long time. And or Mark Montoya, right? And these are on the weekends. These are the guys that I'm competing against, right? So in my mind, sometimes it's like I don't have the luxury of taking time off because these guys have a decade of experience on me for the most part. And I have to make sure that every time that I can fill a gap or try to catch up to that, I'm going to do that, So the time that I lack maybe in experience or age, I'm making up with by obsessively studying film, watching fights, game planning, trying to stay on top of everything. So that's how I look at it. And it's not like I'm trying to necessarily, my goal is not to be better than those individuals. I look up to all of those guys, right? And the fact of the matter is I'm never going to catch up to them in age. There's always going to be a 10-year gap there, right? So I have to remind myself of that. They're always going to have more experience than me. But I do like the ability of just having something kind of in front of me that I'm chasing, right? I watch those guys work every week. I admire all of their work. And I want to be like them. And so I chase after that, and I think that's kind of what drives me is seeing what they've accomplished, knowing the knowledge and skill sets that they have, the athletes that they work with, right? That's where I want to go. And so every opportunity I have to try to narrow that gap, even if it's by this much, I'm going to take it.
This is where I will do the right, but you're also 10 years younger and competing on the same stages and alongside of them. So please make sure to give yourself some of that grace and some of that kindness
I
of
forget
like,
that part. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we all do.
Yeah.
I understand completely.
Yeah.
I've found from my experience doing the Coach Conversation series, which is just over a year old at UFC.com. Thank you greatly for always being a part of it.
My pleasure.
That there is a tremendous amount of respect and camaraderie within the coaching fraternity.
Yeah.
What is it like to be a part of that and be able to look to some of the people that are in Colorado that you're close with, obviously Nixick, some of these other folks, and just get guidance, have mentors, pick brains, have those conversations? Because for me, it's one of the things that I've always craved in life, always sought out in life, and value greatly, even just from my perspective as a writer and as a media member. What's it like for you as a coach in there to have that group of people and build that rapport in those relationships?
To be honest, it's incredible. And it's something that I really, really value in the sport and something that I really look forward to, to have access to those guys. And to be honest, I don't know what it's like in other sports. I don't know what it's like in the NFL or NBA or, I don't know if other coaches communicate like that. But man, look, after a big win or after a hard loss, one of the first few people that always message, it's like Tyson will always send me a message, right? And congratulate me or maybe console me or give me some words of encouragement. Same thing with Eric Nixick. We always communicate. Trevor is always a text or a phone call away. Like to have access to people like that, minds in the sport like that are literally at the forefront of the sport, with the knowledge they have, it's really incredible. And it's humbling for me that I have even the access to those people. There are some coaches that aren't as accessible, or they don't choose to make themselves accessible. And that's totally fine. I don't hold that against any single person.
Right.
The fact that people at that level open themselves up and are totally cool with having discourse, bouncing ideas off of each other. For like when I go to Vegas in 2 weeks, I'm 100%. I'm going to be going over to Extreme to talk to Eric. I'm going to go to Syndicate and meet up with John Wood. We're going to talk, we're going to exchange ideas, and man, we might meet right across the cage from each other a month after that. And that's never an issue. You know what I'm saying? Because I think we all understand the bigger picture here. We all understand the role that we're in. We are able to kind of empathize with each other about the what we go through as coaches. And the goal is to make all of these athletes better. It's not about us at the end of the day. So for us to share this knowledge with each other and our experiences with each other, man, it's really, really valuable to me. And it's something that I really hold dearly to myself. And I'm really happy with that part of the sport.
One of the through lines through this conversation so far has been your desire and work towards always improving, always getting better, always learning more. You are somebody that on fight nights, when you're not cornering, when you're not coaching, when you're not abroad coaching and able to sit and watch fights, you are constantly asking questions. And one of the things I know you've really sort of gotten interested in over these last several months is the judging, is the scoring, is that side of things. And I know you're going to the ABC conference here in a few weeks. What has made you want to really focus in and learn more about that and take the step of going to the ABC conference, which for me is still a thing that I want to get to.
Yeah.
And a thing that I think is vitally important for coaches, commentators, media, fighters themselves. So what was it for you that made you go, this is a thing I need to get to?
I think it's two pieces. One, like you said, my goal is to always learn more. My goal is to be the best educated coach around, because that's only going to help the people that I work with. Right. So, if I know the most that I can about this sport, I can pass that along to my athletes, and hopefully that gives them a better chance of winning and succeeding. The other part of it is that, like I said before, I do value consistency with words and with actions. For as good and bad as Twitter is, it's an interesting place. I think you can agree with me on that.
It's the best terrible invention ever.
Exactly. Look, there is a lot of complaining about judging and refereeing, and I can stick my hand up and say I've been part of that. I don't hold back my opinion on Twitter. But that being said, if there's an opportunity for me to go learn more about it and ask questions, I think anytime you have a complaint or a criticism or something like that, if you're not providing some type of solution to it as well, then you're just noise, and you're just part of the problem. So for me, I see the ABC here. I heard Mike Mazzulli multiple times put the offer on the table. If you're a coach, if you're an athlete, come to this for free, right? We're going to have you there. And so I said, awesome, cool. I'm going to take him up on that, and to be fair, it took a little while to get through to him and to have that correspondence get started, and shout out to everyone that helped me with that, and kind of get the ball rolling. But, I talked to him, he said, I can come, we're good to go on that. So I was like, you know what, I paid for it out of my pocket. Easton's not paying for this. My fighters aren't paying for this. This is something that I want to do for myself and for my athletes and for the sport as a whole. I'm going to go learn more. And I promise you, I know for a fact, I'm going to learn something there.
Right.
I don't know what it's going to be. And maybe it reaffirms what I think about the sport already. Maybe it changes my view of the sport. I'm open to either of those. I'm not going to go there with any preconceived notions or an opinion stuck in my head. I'm going to go learn as much as I can. I'm going to ask questions. I'll be respectful about it. But I'm going there to learn. I'm going there to learn. At the end of the day, this is a sport that I'm in at the highest level, and I feel like I owe it to my athletes. I feel like I owe it to the space to just go out there and represent and learn as much as I can. If I'm going to be an active participant in this industry, it's in my best interest, and I think everyone's interest, that I'm as educated as possible. Otherwise, you're just a talking head.
I can tell you right now that I'm going to clip that portion, and that is going to be one of the clips from this show that goes out, because I think we laugh and we chuckle, right? But to me, it is a thing that I try to talk about regularly. It's a thing I try to hold myself to. If I don't have that background, if I don't have the understanding, one, I'm going to go try to find it.
Yep.
I'm going to try to get it. I'm going to ask the people I need to ask. I'm going to talk to whoever I need to talk to. Two, I'm going to shut the hell up until I get it.
Yes.
Because, we obviously judging and scoring of fights has been a thing that we've been talking about for years now on end, most recently with the Brandon Moreno Alexandre Pantoja fight.
Yep.
And there's a lot of how many of those folks have sat through a judging course?
Exactly.
Have sat through, have even read the scoring criteria. And I know this
Yep.
is Sean Sheehan's always constant one, right? It's 3 pages long.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a hard read.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward, and then it's all right there. And then you can do supplemental things to further understand it. But like for me, I've done that course. I've passed that course.
Yep.
And I've talked to judges. I have relationships with, people on that side of things. So when I sit down and do it, I feel like I'm coming from a place of knowledge, and that's where I always want to come from. And so I commend you for taking those steps. I want to see more people do it. I hope more people take Mike Mazzulli up on that offer and just in general further educate themselves. Because as you said, if you're not, you're just a talking head. You're just a loud voice shouting into the wind. And there's plenty of that already.
Exactly. And look, like, that's not to say that there's not merit to these opinions and arguments, right? We know that
100%.
We know that, right? There's plenty of issues in this sport, but if you're going to take action, if you're going to say something, let's put some substance behind it, So, like I said, yeah, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to learn as much as I can. I know for a fact I'm going to learn something new. And then, when I say something, I hope it has a little bit more merit to it, and I hope the people that hear it, that need to hear it, take it a little bit more seriously. And ultimately, I hope maybe I can help impact some change in this sport. It's probably we're planting a seed for a tree that we're not going to be able to enjoy the shade of, right? But I'm okay with that too. It's the same thing that I'm doing with USA Muay Thai, right? We're planting seeds for generations that are much further down the line. I'm okay with that, but I do want to help impact change and do it the right way. And this is the first step. You have to take action. You cannot just talk about it. So this is, and it's not like I don't want to be some type of like martyr or, yes, I am paying 100%. For it, but I'm putting my money where my mouth is. That's exactly what it is. No one's sponsoring me to go out there for this. I'm doing it from my own pocket with my own time away from my athletes so I can learn more, so I can help them and hopefully have a more educated opinion on what's going on.
As we get towards the end of our time, and I thank you greatly for doing this today. We've talked a lot about the path to where you are. I want to shift to future and forward thinking.
Sure.
As a striking coach, as someone who greatly appreciates and works in the striking arts, what do you see as sort of the next evolution of striking in MMA? What's the next piece of the puzzle that you think in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years is going to go from being less prominent now to the thing we're talking about every single weekend? And man, I can't believe people weren't doing this or utilizing this more often and sooner.
Sure. In my mind, there's two, and one comes, I think, they both obviously I have reasons for. One, I think, is what I would personally like to see, but what I would expect to see is a little bit more fluency in clinch positions inside of MMA. So people being a little bit more comfortable there, engaging a little bit longer, finding their weapons a little bit more there. We're starting to see it a little bit, right? But, obviously the first one that comes to my mind is Matt Brown. I trained with him for a while when he was out here. I watched him fight for a long time. He's a prime example of that. And I still do think that there's quite a few gaps in MMA in the standing clinch positions with the weapons in particular. That's something that I would really like to see develop a little bit more. And yes, that's my Muay Thai bias coming in on that side of things. But I do think, to me, the biggest part of MMA is the transitions, and clinch, in my opinion, is a transition. And I think that we will see some more fluency in that area in the next couple of years. And I'm personally really excited for that. So there's a lot to be explored there. Clinch on the fence, clinch in the open, upper body, transitioning to lower body stuff. There's a lot of ton of areas that you can explore there. So I'm excited to see that, hopefully come about. The other one, which we're starting to see already, but not in a way that I think maybe people are doing or intentionally or with purpose behind it is being more fluent in both stances and being kind of more of just a fluid fighter overall. I think that's a big difference between Muay Thai and MMA. And I think in MMA, given the rule set, given the weapons, all of that, it makes more sense and there's a lot more opportunity. And I think as people start to train that more and understand the opportunities available, it is going to be something that we see more commonplace in the sport. It's not going to be just one-sided fighters. What I like to call they're going to be bistantial. They're going to be able to fight out of both stances, just as effectively. And that's something that that seed was planned a long time ago when I trained with Corey for so many years and his coach, Christian Allen. That is how Christian trained Corey from the get-go. Corey was naturally right-handed, of course, but from day one, he was training out of both stances. And you can see how he fights now. He's effective, of course, in both stances, both hands, both legs. And I think we're going to see a more natural evolution towards that in MMA in the next couple of years. I don't think we're fully there yet, but I think we're going to work towards that.
Corey, of course, bantamweight contender, Corey Sandhagen, who started, I believe, as like a 13, 14-year-old, was sort of his introduction. And so has a nice little long run up of working on that both stances.
Yep.
As a coach, how do you sort of start to implement that with people that didn't have that forever build like Corey did, where they're naturally orthodox, they're naturally southpaw? How do you work to build that? And then is there like, now we're not going to unveil that yet, we're not ready to pull the trigger on it? Or is it just, as you feel comfortable, go and use what you can use?
Yeah, it's, for me, depending on the stage of the athlete's development, where they're at, normally what I'll do is I'll just take bits and pieces of the other side, right? So if they're a right-handed fighter, this is a perfect example. We watched Alec Volkanovski against Yair. He throws his inside low kick from orthodox and he pulls that leg all the way back to southpaw, and then he fires off of that to create a new angle and change the distance a little bit too. That one to me is like super easy, bite-sized, very effective, right? So just taking small pieces. A lot of the times what I'll do is, okay, we're gonna create a transition from right-handed fighting to left-handed fighting. And then we're going to capitalize on that new angle. And then we're going to get back to our home stance after that. So we're going to start as a righty. We'll throw the inside low kick, come back to lefty. We'll attack off of that. And then we'll get back to righty right after. So just teaching them to learn how to make the transition and hide the transition with a strike. And then understanding just a basic piece of offense off of that transition and then getting back to their home stance. I personally believe most athletes, at least the ones that I've worked with, you learn your strong side offense first. If you're right-handed, you learn how to attack as a righty. Then you master your right-handed defense. And then you work on your weak side offense. And then you master your weak side defense last. That's always the hardest thing for people to get is defense in their weak side stance. So I try to get them to spend as little time in that stance as possible, create the opportunity, attack, and then get back to your home stance where your defense is better. And then over time, it's learning to stay in that stance a little bit longer, being a little bit more comfortable with it. And then we can blend into, okay, we have offense and defense from both sides.
Before I let you get out of here, what are the next few stops on the schedule? Who are the next couple athletes we will see you in the corner of, whether it's UFC or abroad? And then let people know how they can follow and pay attention to everything that you've got going on.
Sure. Yeah. So I have, like we talked about, we have the conference coming up in 2 weeks. So I'm going to be out there. And I'm excited for that to, Nixick is going out to that too. And we're going to talk and network out there. And so I'm excited for that. If anyone's going out there for that, hit me up, let me know. And I'd love to sit down, have a coffee and chat and talk about the sport. And then after that, my main focus right now is my guy, Bojan Velichkovic. He's in Octagon MMA. If you guys haven't heard of Octagon, man, they're killing it over there. It's a fantastic promotion. It's weird to call it, I guess, a regional promotion, right? Because Europe is
one of the things I struggle with when I talk about them or KSW or anybody that isn't like the UFC, Bellator 1 level that people identify. It's like, it's not fair to call them a regional promotion because they're massive. But that's how we look at it from North American bias.
Yeah, exactly. But Yeah, so he's in the middle right now of a 16-man welterweight tournament over there. He's had 2 wins so far this year in that tournament, so we're down to the semifinals. He's fighting David Kozma, who is a rematch from a couple years ago, and Kozma was their longstanding welterweight champion. So if he wins this fight, which is September 16th in Frankfurt, Germany, he'll be fighting in the finals. On the other side of that bracket is Louis Glissman from Denmark, who's a fantastic jiu-jitsu black belt and high-level wrestler. And then this name you might be familiar with, his Andreas Michailidis, I believe, from Greece. He fought
Poatan,
Poatan in the UFC, and he's been on a really, really great tear over here in Octagon now. He's kind of found his home there. So we have our hands full the rest of the year with that. But the winner of that comes home with 300,000 euros, which, man, outside of the big promotions, you're not seeing money like that being thrown around very often. So, man, this has been a fantastic kind of like end of career for Boyan. We've done 26 professional fights together. So we have number 27 and 28 coming up, and that's going to be kind of my main focus for the rest of the year. We're getting ready for Germany, September 16th, and then it'll be a quick turnaround for December 10th right after that. So, that's my focus. And then, a couple of amateur Muay Thai events here and there to cap off the rest of the year, but that's going to be kind of what the rest of my year looks like.
Okay. 2 things before I let you get out of here. You mentioned sitting down for a coffee, not a Starbucks, right?
Not a Starbucks. That's Elliot's favorite, but it's not my favorite.
And then the other thing that I have to ask you about is the curtain on flights. I need the explanation. Like, it's the last thing on my list here.
Yeah.
Obviously, I follow you.
Yeah.
I see everybody tagging you of like, hey, Sean, I'm on the right side of the curtain. I'm on the wrong side of the curtain. The curtain's so far away.
Yeah.
I need the explanation here.
Man, so, it just, it ends up, obviously, I travel plenty, and I have status with the airline, but I have just enough status where I get a good seat right behind the curtain. I don't have enough status where I'm on the right side of the curtain. So somehow I always end up in the seat right in front of the curtain, just facing it for the entire.
So you got a little bit of extra leg room, but none of the first.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So for whatever reason, I end up in that seat every single flight. And it's kind of turned into a thing now, and it's been great. I really love it. I'm happy for my friends that are on the right side of the curtain. I empathize with my friends that are on the same side of the curtain as me. And we'll do our best to continue fighting the power with that. So
let folks know where they can follow the Curtain Chronicles and everything else you're doing before.
Instagram is Sean Madden _striking. And then Twitter is Sean M striking. I'm on both of those platforms. Come follow me on Fight Night on Twitter. I usually watch the fights and put my opinion out there. And then on Instagram, come follow me there as well too.
I say it just about every week that we are sitting watching fights together. Go follow Sean. He is brilliant. You've seen it here. I appreciate the time, my friend. I'm glad we were able to do this. Enjoy the non-Starbucks coffee today.
Thank you. And just real quick before we close out, I want to thank you for giving me the platform too. I enjoy our conversations all the time. Thank you for letting me be a part of the Coaches Conversation series. That's been really valuable. Not only to read those, if you guys don't read those and follow those, please pay attention to those, because there's really high-level coaches giving out some fantastic insight on those fights. I learn a lot from the ones that I'm not participating in, and the ones that I get to participate in have been a lot of fun too. So please pay attention to those.
I appreciate that. We may have to have a conversation here when we end the recording about a certain BMF title fight that's coming up that we're going to do a special one for. Because we can't let that fight go by, even though it's not a real title.
Yeah,
we can't let that fight go by without talking to some people about it.
It's too good not to. Yeah.
For Sean, I'm Spencer. This has been a conversation with. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.